Hey guys, good morning to everybody out here in YouTube land. I wanted to get going again on another video. We have a very large hockey slate today. This is your buddy Chapo Dong from the DFS Army. I am a coach and contributor on the website. We offer an awful lot of coaches and an awful lot of sports. If you're a daily fantasy player, then to be honest with you, you need to go to dfsarmy.com and you need to check us out. I'm using the YouTube platform. You can also follow me on Twitter at Chapodong. That's my screen name or my Twitter handle. I'm using this format here to hopefully reach more people. I try to reach people out on Twitter. I try to coach people up. If people don't want to become members of a website, I try to coach them up there as well. And hopefully people like what we do. They follow some of our other members and they decide that we have the best community on the internet and they want to get involved, and at that point it's just a no-brainer. We've got a lot of compliments, we've got a lot of winners, we've got a very tight-knit community with a bunch of people willing to help you out. So just wanted to let you know that's where I'm from. If this is the first time you've ever found me on the bigger NHL slates, I'm going to tend to go to YouTube to try and help bust up that slate really quick in 15 minutes or less, because to be honest with you, it's too much to write and I don't have the time to do it. On the smaller slates, I write, and you can find me by searching dfsarmy.com. I call my column the Breakaway. It's an easier way to follow us. We had a pretty good night last night. If we went opposite of the chalk, the Rangers blew up in our faces. But if you focused a little bit on what you did not think would happen, then you did okay in some tournaments. Let's dive into today's slate really quick. Just to point out, we're going to be looking for higher over-unders. I've done a little bit of research across these games. I've got a few games targeted, and I'll show you those in a minute. I'm not going to go into too much detail other than we will be referencing this page here at RotoGrinders, free plug. We don't have our own stats at dfsarmy.com yet for hockey, but we do for basketball, we do for NFL. We've got a great PGA write-up with stats. You guys are going to be blown away if you decide to become VIPs and check it out. For hockey, though, we tend to focus on who plays on which lines. I'm looking at DraftKings pricing and who plays on power plays. So as I scroll down this list, Pittsburgh's in a pretty decent spot. Boston doesn't play very well at home. I know that didn't work out lately, and I know Pittsburgh got shut out. Washington's another spot. They dominate New Jersey the past 10 times they've met. Montreal right now is, New York gives up points. The Islanders give up points. This game is reflecting that. It could go either way, being that Montreal's on the road. I will say this. The power play for Montreal has been dominant, and the Islanders have had a weak kill. So if you're going to play any Canadians tonight, focus on the power play units. If you wanted to stack that up, or if you wanted to, get cheaper value and go after the second line, I'd probably focus here. If we scroll down a little bit more, I love the Toronto and Philly game. This game doesn't have an over-under or a line yet. I don't know what numbers are crunching, but I'm telling you, this one crosses the board. It looks like to me that Toronto obviously scores a lot of points and gives a lot of points up. On the season, Philadelphia has scored quite a bit of fantasy points, and they match up against Toronto, who's given them up. They've given up their own fair share. So if you've got two dynamic offenses going against two softer defenses, generally you have the recipe for a shootout. On a 13-game slate, I'm probably starting here. I don't know if the chalk is going to do that tonight. It's going to be very spread out on a big slate anyway, because NHL is such a high variance sport. But this is where I'm starting. If I look at the Toronto and Philly game, I can tell you that over the last 10 games, they've averaged together combined 6.4 goals per game. That's strong. When most of these are 5s and 5.5s, if you found a 6.4 on this, you'd be all over it. And another game that does that as well, in terms of team-to-team matchup, is down here, Calgary and Ottawa. This one is another one that doesn't show on paper. It looks like a couple mediocre teams, a couple of solid defenses. It may turn out to be that way. And these numbers here reflect, whatever. But I looked up their last 10 games they've faced each other, and they have averaged 7.1 goals. You could pull some numbers out of here, and you could get some value out of here. Calgary hasn't been great of late as far as fantasy production. Ottawa's been a bit better, but historically, over the last 10 games that they have played head-to-head, these games have turned into shootouts. There's a sneaky little tournament play for you. We'll dive into Minnesota. I like Minnesota. St. Louis, I don't know what to think of them right now. They just shut out Pittsburgh, but yet they've been on the skids the past 14 games. Minnesota should handle them, but this is a division rivalry, and you don't know which way these guys are going to go. I do know that our power play has dominated the Minnesota penalty kill, even though the kill looks pretty good on paper. So there may be some sneaky stuff here with the power play, first units. But over here on the Minnesota side, at even strength, I'd be looking at rostering a couple of their guys as well. All I'm trying to do is narrow down a player pool for you guys. When you go down to Columbus and Nashville, I crossed that game off because in their last 10 games, they only average about 4.5 goals per game, and I don't really want much of a part of that. I did take note of the Buffalo and Dallas game. Their power play, especially, Dallas's penalty kill sucks. They're second worst in the league, and Buffalo's is seventh best. When the seventh best matches up against the second worst, you can predict they might get a goal or two. So even though this game, it could turn back and forth, it's not maybe the best game on paper when you look at offenses matching up against defenses. But when you look at that power play, I'd be focused on some of these power play guys for Buffalo. I don't know how much I'd be over here on the Dallas side, maybe a guy here, a guy there. There's usually some good value down in this area. I know that this boy Johns has become a favorite of ours. I know Klingberg's cheap and fills in on the power play, so you've got options. And then in the later games, Winnipeg and Chicago could be okay. Looking at some numbers, you find some pretty conflicting evidence. You find that they only score about 4.5 goals when they meet up against each other. That's a good one for a hot goaltender like Scott Darling to jump into because he shouldn't get just torn apart, but Winnipeg can score. So, and we know that the Chicago line, the second and third lines have been doing some damage lately, so there's a good source of value there. Everybody loves picking on Arizona. Vancouver doesn't travel well. I'm not real high on this game. I can see people wanting to pick on Arizona. Go for it if you want to. Edmonton coming off the shutout from Talbot last night, and the San Jose Sharks. Again, one-offs. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm focusing in on these games right here. I'll show you in the filter. The Montreal, New England, or New York Islanders game, Pittsburgh's offense as a whole, this game here for sure, Toronto and Philly, Washington Capitals offense, Minnesota Wild offense, maybe the game in Chicago. I knocked all of the others out. Not that I don't care about them. One-offs from these games are always in play, and you can find guys that are bringing value lately and are in good, pretty good spots, and if you can find that, run with it. I'm talking about where am I going to find my production on a consistent basis in a matchup that is a good matchup on paper. If I was to pick a goalie, I'm looking at Holtby out of Washington because they're heavy Vegas favorites. I'm looking at Price out of Montreal because they should win as well. Holtby is 8-1-1 his last 10 times facing his opponent, New Jersey right now, and they don't score a lot. They average 3 goals a game against New Jersey last 10 meetings. New Jersey only averages 1.5 goals though, so that's a 4.5. That's a pretty low over/under total. Holtby's a pretty safe bet tonight. You look down here at Carey Price in Montreal. Where's that game over here? You're going to see a little bit of the same. You're going to see utter dominance of the Islanders, 9-1 record in their last 10 times. And, although the Islanders have been pretty hot lately, and I do like some Islanders tonight, I wouldn't fault you for taking Carey Price if you wanted to. Then again, we've got a decent total of 5.1 game goals per game over their last 10. So you're kind of okay there, kind of safe there. Those would be the goalies that I'd be looking at. There are other options. This is how I do it. I narrow down the player pool, and on a 13 game slate, I bite a bullet. It's a hard slate to predict. NHL's a fluky sport. You're just going to have to draw some lines in the sand and stick to your guns, unless you have a budget of $100 or $1,000 every night that you're throwing out, 4, 5, 6 different lineups and can kind of get some pieces of all these games. If you're just throwing out 1 or 2 lineups, I want to stick with the teams that are best on paper. And I've identified them here with some one-offs from these offenses, maybe this game here. And then, of course, if I see another one-off, I will. But what I do when I'm looking for value, because I'm going to take an expensive goaltender, I'm going to look to roster some studs. When I'm looking for value, I want to see if there's any cheap value. I sort by 4-week numbers, and I knock out the offenses I'm not focused on, and I sort by salary so that I get the bottom ones. I go down a few pages into the numbers, and I start looking for green numbers. If I can find 3.5 points out of a $3,000 defenseman, hello. He happens to be on Toronto, which is in a marquee game. I'm going to double check over here on the Toronto game, and I'm looking for where he's playing. And is he getting some power play time? He's not getting power play time. He's on the second line, so he should be getting, 18, 19, 20 minutes per game, which is great for a defenseman, especially if I'm punting. There aren't a lot others in this price range. If you watch this right-hand column on me, I'm going to go up a page, and I'll show you another couple that I would be looking at. I would be looking at Chimera over here in New York. Now, I don't study the injury news right now, but I haven't looked tonight. So if he's on the DL, I apologize. But I'd also be looking at Beagle out of Washington. He's been on a tear the past few weeks. I might check him with his recent game log of 10 games just to see if he's still running hot. Looking into these other games again, I'm focusing on finding some green value here, cheap value. Straight Orlov got hot lately. Daly out of Pittsburgh as a defenseman. Burakovsky, of course. Peralt, of course. Peralt, whatever you want to call him. Beaulieu is one of my favorites when Montreal is going well. Pominville had a great game last game out. Hartman, Boychuk. These are guys that I'm looking to throw in one or two in a typical lineup. And then I'm going right back to sorting by fantasy points from top to bottom. And then I'm going to see what other cheaper guys I can't pull out of these blues. So I'm going to look at Granlund. I'm going to look at maybe Biff. How about Ehlers? Just start sorting down the list. Look at Nick Leddy. I like the Islanders tonight. Leddy's producing. I'm going to cross-check them with their game logs, but I'm going to start throwing in the cheaper guys that I can get is going to allow me then to go into the games that I like, Toronto, and look at their number one line. Serves on the second power play. I might come down here and grab Komarov, Nylander, and Kadri. If I'm doing cash, though, I'm not going to stack this whole line. I'm going to look for maybe if I've got the money for Matthews and then jump up into this line with Nylander, and I'm going to take the two of them because I'm going to cross 2 lines worth of scoring. If a goal scores, it's going to happen. It probably comes off of one of the lines that I have a player on, and if it comes off of the power play, bam, I got a couple of them. I love overlapping on the power play. If I jump up to another game here like New York, the Islanders, I love Tavares. I'm going to try and probably spend up for him if I don't put in Price as my goalie. If I was looking in cash, I'd probably take Strom or Nelson to get on that second line. As long as they're producing, I'm going to cross-check and make sure they're producing recently. But I'm going to try and spread out across a couple of lines, take 2 players, no more than 2 players per team so that I can spread out across the other offenses that I want to spread out across, and I'm going to try and overlap on the power play. Now, if I'm playing a tournament, I want every piece of that production. I wouldn't mind the second line of the Islanders because I get a little bit of power play exposure to that second line, and I got 2 on the first line. I could take the first line. I could come over here in Montreal and just take the first line of Pacioretty, Denault, and Radulov and just slam dunk that power play and their first line, and hopefully they score a couple of goals tonight and I get all the points off of that line. So again, if you want to know where I'm focused today, it's on these offenses here because I've done a little bit of research and written down who gives up points and who doesn't. I dig through these points, the production, and I'm looking for value first. I stick a guy or 2 in there. A lot of times he's a defenseman, sometimes he's a center, and then I start going after my studs. I roster these up by points produced over the last 4 weeks, and I start trying to find who are the cheaper, more reasonable guys in this list that I can get into these games, and then I start making sure that I can start attacking these lines. Like I look at Sheary and Malkin, and if I go up to Pittsburgh's starting lines, where's Pittsburgh? There's Sheary on the front line, and there's Malkin on the second line. They've moved. Sheary was on the first power play unit there for a while. This was a great way to get access to Crosby and get access to these 2 lines, the top scoring lines on Pittsburgh, along with getting access to the power play line. This is a little different now because Sheary's on the second unit. But you can kind of see what I'm trying to do. Guys, play with this. Do this. If you're a VIP, jump in to the DFSArmy.com's Slack channel in the NHL room and talk to us today. We'll be around. There's a lot of survivors that are fighting for today in the survivor contest, and we're going to be helping them out. So there's your slate breakdown really quick. DFS Army, my name's Chapadong. Hopefully you get something out of this. We'll see you guys later.